In this episode, we talk about the outbreak of a rare neurological disorder in Pune, which is concentrated in areas reportedly facing inadequate sanitation. We also discuss a recent video featuring a young boy from Kerala that has sparked discussions about the anganwadi meal programs. But first, we talk about the US's crackdown on illegal migrants. Hi, I'm Ichha Sharma, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. After returning to power last month, US President Donald Trump announced several immigration-related executive orders, leading to a massive crackdown on undocumented migrants in the country.
All illegal entry will immediately be halted, and we will begin the process of returning millions and millions of criminal aliens back to the places from which they came. I will end the practice of catch and release.
Since these orders were issued, there has been a growing sense of unease in New Delhi as roughly 20,000 undocumented Indians are either facing final removal orders or are currently held in detention centers across the US. In fact, yesterday, in a significant development, a US military aircraft carrying Indian migrants departed for India, marking the first deportation of its kind since Trump's return to office. Now, last week, Prime Minister Narendra Modi had his first phone call with President Trump since the latter's return, in which the two leaders appeared to have discussed this issue. To further understand this ongoing situation and its implications for India, my colleague Shashank Bhargava speaks with the Indian Express's diplomatic affairs editor, Shubhajit Roy.
Shubhajit, one of the major poll planks for Trump was this massive crackdown on illegal migrants and mass deportation. And in this regard, Trump has been talking about Mexico and some other South and Central American countries. But how much do illegal immigrants from India feature in his rhetoric?
Well, you're right that the illegal immigration or immigration as an issue was the number one agenda for the Trump campaign when he was contesting for elections. It was important for him last time as well, but this time it is front and center. And in the first few days itself, he has shown his intent by signing a slew of executive orders to crack down on immigration. Now, obviously, the South American and Central American countries, Mexico, El Salvador, Guatemala, they are obviously the biggest chunk of illegal immigrants in the United States. But outside of that region, Central and South America, India is the biggest source of illegal immigration to the United States. If we see the numbers, there are about 725,000 Indians, which is 7.25 lakh illegal Indians in the United States, of which about 20,000 have been sort of identified for deportation. So essentially what has happened is these 20,000 people have been A, detained, B, they have also exhausted all the legal options before they have been identified by the US immigration authorities and they are ready to be deported. And now, so that's why it's a very important conversation that Prime Minister Modi had with the US President Trump, as well as External Affairs Minister Shashank when he went to Washington, D.C. for the inauguration. And before that as well, he had gone in the last week of December. He had a conversation with his counterpart, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, where they also discussed the issue of illegal immigration. So that's the broad outline of the problem and the challenge that confronts the two countries.
And so do we know what Prime Minister Narendra Modi basically said to Donald Trump in that phone call? Because Trump, for example, has not been talking about India in the same way he's been talking about, say, Mexico or Colombia. For these countries, he's been saying that, criminals and gangsters come from these countries. But this is obviously not how he's talking about people coming from India.
Well, you're right. During the phone call between Prime Minister Modi and US President Trump, what we know is that President Trump, when he was asked by reporters there that whether Prime Minister had agreed to take illegal immigrants, Trump said he will do what's right. He, meaning Modi, will do what's right. We are discussing. And he also said that they had a long talk on Monday, which is January 27th. And he also announced that Modi would visit the United States probably in February. And to quote him, we have a very good relationship with India, he said. Now, if you really see this framing of how he has answered the question on the illegal immigration, whether it came up during the conversation, he's been extremely restrained by Trump standards. Because if you talk of Trump speak, he's used these sort of language which is seen as undiplomatic and sometimes even some might even say crude. But in this case, he has been much more restrained, much more nuanced. And this obviously shows that he has been strategic in his speech when it comes to important strategic partner and a high stakes relationship. So essentially the way he talks about illegal immigrants from say Colombia, which he did last week, where he sort of talked about these illegal immigrants from Colombia being illegal, being criminals, gangsters, and all of that. And he kind of sort of used that bullying behavior to essentially get Colombia to accept planes full of illegal immigrants. That kind of language was notably absent. And that is something is important to note because the Indian government has been very, very careful about how it frames this immigration issue. And it has tried to differentiate between the illegal immigration and the legal immigration from India to the US.
Right, and Shubhajit, could you give a sense of how New Delhi is navigating this challenge of communicating with the Trump administration and the way this situation might play out?
Shashank, India has been sort of very categorical about the differentiation between legal immigration and illegal immigration. And it has consistently maintained that it values legal immigration much more because, in last year alone, about 1 million, that is about 10 lakh Indians got visas to the United States. And this was the figure for the second year in a row that the Indians had got about 1 million visas in a year itself. And then there are like about 350,000 Indian students who are in graduate program, which is the master's program, mostly in American universities in the master's program. And also almost 70% of the H-1B visa, which is the skilled workers visa, professionals visa, which Indian tech companies usually move or relocate some of the highly qualified and trained Indian professionals in the IT sector to the United States. Almost 70% of those visas go to Indians. So in the Indian perspective, this legal immigration route should not be jeopardized because of these about, say, 20,000 people who are ready to deported or these 700,000 people who are illegal immigrants in the United States. Now, for India, it's a sort of, if it weighs the two numbers, on one side you have about 1 million visas in a year and 1,100 immigrants who came back last year and about 20,000 immigrants who are ready to be deported, then the balance is tilted very much in favor of the legal immigrants. So it does not want that to be tainted by these 20,000 people who have gone there by illegal ways and illegal routes. Of course, it's a sad story because these people have probably taken loans, they have sold off the land and taken that treacherous trek through jungles of South America and Central America before they reached and crossed over to the United States, or they crossed through the icy, cold, borders of Canada and US. But the Indian government's point is that they see the value of the legal immigration and prioritize them over the illegal immigration.
Right, and this is the reason why India has accepted to take back these illegal immigrants. In fact, a plane is already on its way. But tell us, is India concerned about the optics of it all?
Yeah, so the Indian government wants that this kind of a deportation, should be done quietly, as was done during the Biden administration or even during the Obama administration.
Basically, they don't want the Trump administration to make a show of it that, look, we are sending all these Indians back.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They don't want a public spectacle of being made by people in shackles and chains, and they are being walked into the or paraded on the tarmac and on the planes, and those videos and photos sort of being put out. So they want that these deportations should happen quietly, as was done during the Biden administration or the previous administrations. And these deportations are not new, but the way the Trump administration and the right wing and the far right wants to be publicized, because that appeals to the base of the Trump voters base and the constituency, that is something that is the most sort of challenging optics wise for India.
Also, Shubhajit, we understand that Trump wants to deport 1 million undocumented migrants in a single year. Could you talk about just how big of a task that will be for the immigration authorities in the US?
Yeah, so it's a mammoth task. The US immigration authorities are sort of stretched to the seams. So if you really break down the numbers, about 1 million, if that's 10 lakh illegal immigrants, if they have to deport, that means they have to deport 2,700 immigrants per day, every day, if you just do the math. And that's what I did. And realized that, if they have to deport 2,700, they have to detain much higher number. Last week, the highest in a day that they could detain was 900. And that was like an all-time high in many, many years. So the US immigration authorities don't have that kind of human resource that they can round up people. They have been given the authority to go to, say, workplaces and, with where they have the intelligence, where they think or they know that there might be illegal immigrants, to go and detain them. So they're going to, say, a pizza joint where they're delivery boys who might be legal immigrants. They're going to schools, they're going to churches, they're going to temples, they're going to mosques, they're even going to hospitals and any public area where they feel there are people who could be doing these low-paying jobs, which are usually done by these illegal immigrants. So right now, that kind of a mandate has been given to the US immigration authorities as per the executive orders signed by President Trump. And also, these immigration authorities have been given targets of about 75 for each field office. That's what we have heard. And so it's a mammoth task. So obviously they need more staff, more people. So the US immigration authorities are now trying to get the US military, US police, and personnel from other agencies to do this job of rounding up people, detaining them, and processing them. And how the US government has been framing is that the immigration is linked to the law and order situation. So these people have to step in and to do this job of rounding up illegal immigrants.
Under the law I'm signing today, the Department of Homeland Security will be required to detain all illegal aliens who have been arrested for theft, burglary, larceny, shoplifting, assaulting a police officer, murder, or any crime that results in death or serious injury. In addition, for the first time ever, this act gives state governments the ability to sue the federal government for immediate injunctive relief if any future administration ever again refuses to enforce the immigration laws of the United States, like happened for 4 long years.
So that's where the situation is. And the unfortunate part is it is also impacting a lot of people in the daily lives. Like, people are not turning up for their workplace, at the workplace, for fear of being rounded up, or kids are not going to school if they are born out of illegal immigrants. They're not going to hospitals if they're ill, they're sick. So it has impacted people in real terms. There are also reports of there are illegal immigrants who essentially are have appointments with the US immigration where, essentially they're known as illegal, but They have been working there for years. They have been abiding by the law. They're living there peacefully. So the US immigration authorities, they usually ask them to come for the appointment, to regularly meet them. So there are these appointments that the illegal immigrants have. They are not being kept. So these people are not turning up for those appointments. So in very real terms, we are seeing this sort of having an impact and fear and panic amongst the immigrant communities. So it is going to be a very, very tough task. And that's where the challenge for the American authorities would be: how would they meet these impossible targets of 1 million people being deported in a year?
And next we talk about the outbreak of a rare disorder in which the immune system attacks the nerve cells. This is the Guillain-Barré Syndrome, whose spread has intensified in Pune with over 150 suspected cases and 5 suspected deaths. The outbreak is concentrated in areas reportedly facing inadequate sanitation, with 83 cases emerging from newly added villages in the Pune Municipal Corporation. In this segment, the Indian Express's Anonna Dutt, who covers health for the newspaper, joins us to discuss the syndrome and the possible reasons behind the outbreak. Anonna, for those who might be hearing about it for the first time, can you tell us what is this rare neurological disorder, GBS, that we'll be discussing today?
So GBS, or Guillain-Barré Syndrome, it's a rare disorder which happens usually as a consequence of some viral infection. It's an autoimmune condition where, after fighting the viral infection, it wrongly triggers the immune system, which causes this condition. And in this, the body starts attacking its own nerves. So there's a nerve coating which gets damaged because of this, and that causes paralysis symptoms.
And the reason we are discussing GBS today is because of the outbreak in Pune. So can you tell us how widespread this outbreak actually is?
So right now we have had 158 cases or so from various regions in Pune. And right now the authorities are not only just looking to stop the spread of the disease, to treat the people who've had it, they're also trying to find out what is the reason, what are the possible infections that might have led to this sort of outbreak of GBS.
Right. And could you also tell us about the demographics of those affected? Are there any particular age groups or communities that seem more vulnerable to GBS?
So it's nothing like somebody is more prone to it or not. However, most of the cases that I'm looking at right now, the ages are around 25, 30-year-olds right now, from what I see. But it's not something that affects a particular age group or so.
Yeah, and also right now, health authorities suspect it's linked to a particular bacteria. Could you tell us what this bacteria is and how it helps spread the infection?
So basically what happens with GBS is that it's not an immediate symptom. So it's not that, if you have an infection right now, you will develop this symptom. One, it is quite rare to see it. So out of several people who are infected with an infection, only a very small percentage will get GBS. Now, the thing is, it also happens about, say, 4 weeks or so after the infection. So it's not an immediate consequence. So by the time you might have recovered from the infection that had initially happened. Right now, what the researchers are doing is they are looking at the patient samples, and they're looking at the history of these patients to figure out what possibly could have led to this outbreak. And a lot of the patients who initially came in, they did complain of having diarrhea a while back. So then the researchers looked at pathogens that cause diarrhea. And they found 4 samples to be positive for a bacteria called Campylobacter jejuni. This is a bacteria that can be transmitted through food and water. They also found some samples that tested positive for a viral infection called norovirus. But the thing is, norovirus is not known to cause GBS. So that for now is not looking like the reason for this current outbreak. Then researchers also looked at other infections that are known to cause GBS, like even the SARS-CoV-2, which led to the COVID-19 pandemic. But those have so far been ruled out. Now the researchers are also looking at poultry sources, etc., for why this might be happening.
And Anonna, are there any special measures being implemented at hospitals, or are there any specific public health warnings or recommendations being given to the Pune residents right now?
So right now, the authorities have also linked that, they've said that this could possibly because of contaminated water being supplied by certain tankers. So one of the things that people have been talking about is this cleanliness of this water and the kind of sanitation that needs to be followed. That is one thing that can be followed. The thing is, GBS itself is not a contagious disease. It does not spread from one person to the other. However, it is triggered by infections, right? So these infections can be prevented by, general preventive things that we do, such as washing our hands, not eating outside too much, not drinking water from outside, like preferably carrying your own water or having mineral water. Things like that which prevent infections itself can bring down the incidence of GBS too.
Also, given the rise in the cases, what are the current treatment options available for the GBS patients in Pune?
So the treatment right now for GBS focuses on symptomatic management. So whatever symptoms you have, the doctors will manage it accordingly. But GBS can also be treated by, giving something called IVIG, which can help in regulating the immune system itself, which basically damages the, cover of the nerves that I mentioned earlier.
Right. And do we know how long it typically takes for patients to fully recover from GBS? And are there any factors that influence the speed and extent of recovery?
So for GBS, the main objective is to treat the person as quickly as possible so that they do not get too many symptoms. So you treat before they go into, say, paralysis. Most people can recover from GBS, but it takes some time, and it is also, the recovery can be challenging. It can take anywhere from a few weeks to a few years to recover from this. And of course, the doctors try to prevent the paralysis from reaching the respiratory system so that your breathing is intact. That is one of the key steps that the doctors try to take.
Also, Anonna, considering the current trend in Pune and the death of 5 suspected patients, do experts foresee a wider spread of GBS across the region or maybe the country?
So right now the outbreak has remained localized. It has been detected within Pune. But of course, the answer would depend on what pathogen is causing it. But since it has remained localized for so long, it doesn't look like, it would just spread to other parts so quickly. But we will have to wait and see what pathogen is causing it. And of course, the local authorities would then take measures accordingly to prevent the spread of that infection.
And in the end, we talk about how a simple request from a child in Kerala has once again sparked discussions about anganwadi meal programs. For those who may not already know, anganwadi workers are engaged under the government's Integrated Child Development Scheme to oversee the education and health of children aged 0 to 6 years, particularly in rural areas. These workers, almost exclusively women, are also responsible for serving hot-cooked meals to around 40 lakh children between the ages of 3 months and 6 years. Now, recently a video featuring a young boy from Kerala went viral in which he was expressing how much he dislikes Upma and would instead prefer Biryani and chicken fry for his anganwadi meal.
Evade? Anganwadil endo vende?
Biryani. Upma vattite biryani.
Upma vattite?
Biryaniyum endom പൊരിച്ച കോഴി.
പറയാം കേട്ടോ, നമുക്ക് പരാതി അറിയിക്കാം കേട്ടോ.
The boy Thraju S. Shankar had been making this request to his mother, who recorded and later uploaded the video. And while his request may seem ordinary, the response it generated was anything but. Among those who took notice was Kerala's Minister for Women and Child Development, Veena George, who responded by saying that the government would consider modifying the Anganwadi menu, taking into account the suggestion of Shanku, as Trajul is fondly known. George also stated, quote, "Under this government, a scheme to provide eggs and milk through Anganwadis has been successfully implemented. In coordination with the Department of Women and Child Development, local bodies provide a variety of foods in Anganwadis," unquote. The Indian Express's Shaju Philip, who has been tracking this story, notes that Kerala has around 33,000 Anganwadis, and the state government has recently begun transforming these centers into smart Anganwadis to provide a more holistic environment for early childhood care. These upgraded centers will include study rooms, rest areas, kitchens, storage spaces, dining halls, gardens, and both indoor and outdoor play areas. These centers play a crucial role in early childhood care, education, and nutrition, with meals designed to meet the dietary needs of young children. You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by Shashank Bhargava and me, Ichha Sharma. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcast@indianexpress.com.